Okay, welcome back to the Contrarians. For this show, our small but mighty panel is looking at a three-way battle between three supergroups composed of former prog rock titans, UK, Asia, and GTR. So UK's first album came out in 1978, featured John Wetton, Bill Bruford, Alan Holdsworth, and Eddie Jobson. Their first album reached number 65 on the US Billboard 200, but they never had a single that charted, and the album did not certify. Now, Asia in 1982 was a pop culture phenomenon. On the back of the number one single heat of the moment, that album was the number one selling album of 1982 in the US, and it sold 4 times platinum. GTR came out in 1986, featuring Steve Howe and Steve Hackett. They had a hit single that went to number 11, When the Heart Rules the Mind, but the album only certified gold, so not nearly as successful as that first Asia album. So the panel's going to go around and tell us what their favorite and least favorite members of these groups are. I'm going to start off tonight with Martin. Martin, what's your number 3?
Okay, I want to disagree with something you said, first of all, though.
Uh-oh.
You called Asia a pop culture phenomenon. I don't think there was any culture in Asia, so I don't think they could be a pop culture phenomenon. They were a sales phenomenon. That was about it. So,
hey, if Rand was here, he may disagree, Martin.
Right. But you know what? I juggled with this a little bit, but I'm going to start with GTR as my favorite. And we got my sign by the two Steves. This record, I do quite like it. I mean, it's very Asia-like. It was recorded at the Townhouse and it's produced by Jeff Downes. So that's why it sounds atrocious and it sounds like Asia. It's very screechy and mid-rangey and noisy for what it is. But then again, Steve Hackett, when he's playing electric, can be kind of screechy and noisy. And Steve Howe has terrible tone, so he's always screechy and noisy. But they're both on here. They're both doing a lot of soloing. It's kind of cool songs. It's very much Asia-like. It is a super group. The other guys, Phil Spalding was essentially a session guy. Max Bacon, he was in Nightwing. Jonathan Mover briefly in Marillion, but yeah, nobody's super famous there. The main reason it doesn't sound like Asia is Max Bacon is a very different voice from John Wetton. I love When the Hearts Rule the Mind. Quite a few of the other songs I like on here as well. I generally like the idea. I mean, it's a mix of about 20% prog, 15% prog Guitar Hero, and the rest of it's pop kind of thing, right? Bit pomp rock to it as well, you might say. Pomp rock doesn't really exist in 1986, but it's a bit like that. But yeah, it's got that loud, noisy Mike Stone production on it, although it's Jeff Downes. Asia's produced by Mike Stone and Jeff, I believe, and this is just produced by Jeff Downes. But yeah, they're both recorded at the Townhouse. So yeah, I'm gonna put this last, but I do have somewhat of a fondness for this. I really don't mind this album very much. That's faint praise, I guess. There's my reissue of it and I've interviewed not all these guys. I've interviewed Steve about it a lot, and I've heard a lot about all the politics in the band and the egos and how they almost got a second album done. And yeah, as you were saying, it did go gold, which is pretty amazing. So anyways, my third choice, GTR.
All right, Grant, what's your third choice tonight?
Okay, my third choice is GTR as well. I don't like anything about this record. Martin, I love Martin, but there is nothing about this record that's redeeming in anything. It's commercial. It sounds horrible. I don't care for, Max Bacon. He just sounds like anybody else. We have no John Wetton on here. Yeah, maybe it's Asia light, but it's no Asia because John Wetton was a force to be reckoned with. Love John Wetton's work, but this is bland. There are no tunes on here for one. Max Bacon is singing, but I don't recall anything on here other than the single that has any kind of catchiness or anything that I want to remember. It's just bland commercial slop. And I know if Rand Kelly's listening to this, that he may just flip out. But I don't think there's anything here. It's Asia Light. This is taking Asia, which was good. Well, we're going to talk about Asia. But there's just no redeeming qualities about this. I would give this, if I'm going to rate this out of 10, I would probably give it a 3. There's just nothing here.
I'd give it a 5.
All right. But I just don't think that there's anything here that's redeeming. You've got Steve Howe, you've got Steve Hackett, but they're both competing for the same spot. There's no trading of guitar solos. There's nothing that makes them stand out. And I do have to disagree with Martin. Steve Howe has a distinctive tone. If you hear any Yes track or you hear any
It's terrible.
Steve Howe,
His tone is horrible.
why is it terrible?
Oh, it just sounds like, the strings are rusty. It's wiry, noisy, grating on the ears. It's a little bit like the same. I complain about it. I love Steve, and I love his writing. I love his solo albums.
You don't like the way he plays.
I love the way he plays. I just don't like his tone. It's a little bit like when I complain about Jerry Garcia's tone. It's just.
I'm not even sure Jerry Garcia had a tone.
Well,
You guys all know
Steve
that
has a tone, but it's like an aggressively horrible tone.
But
It's
at
very
least Steve, okay, we're going on a tangent, but at least Steve Howe, you can listen to what he sounds like and you know who it is.
Yes,
If we
agreed.
have Ronnie Montrose here, Ronnie could be anybody.
Yeah.
But the truly great players have a distinct tone. And whether you like Steve's
No,
tone or
style,
not,
style. I mean, you can have a tone or a style. They're two separate
I
things,
don't
right?
know.
He has a
Yeah,
great
but
style and a distinct style. And it's also a little Jerry Garcia like, but his tone is the sound, the production, the engineering of his guitar, whatever, the effects he picks. He generally has this really, it sounds like his strings are rusty tones.
You know
all
what?
right,
If
I
Eric
like
Clapton
it.
could be
That's all
famous
good.
with the
It's all
woman
good. This is
tone,
what's fun about these shows.
why
I'm
can't
good with
Steve
that.
Howe be famous with the rusty string tone? Let's make that a thing.
But don't forget, when Guitar Player was a magazine and it was something important, he got voted in on their panel as one of the greatest guitar players of all time in the 70s. I can't argue with that.
I ain't
You know?
arguing with that either. I love his acoustic playing too.
Okay. I'm just saying, this is what's fun about these discussions. I love it. So there you go. GTR is my number 3. I think there's no redeeming quality here. I'm just saying.
Okay. Let's go down to Rich. I'm gonna back clean up today. Rich, what's your number 3 pick of the bands?
Well, my number 3 pick is GTR. I remember when this album
There you
first
go.
came out, reading an interview with Steve Howe and Steve Hackett, and they said that the first song they wrote together was "When the Heart Rules the Mind," and that's really the only song on the album that I think is really, really good. I love that song. I love Steve Howe's playing for it, and I like his sound. I've always liked his sound. I don't know, the rest of the album, it's kind of like them doing a pop album. And it's produced by a keyboard player. And you think for an album that has 2 guitarists on it, there'd be a little bit more guitar, but I hear more guitar synthesizers and keyboards in it than I do guitar. So it's funny that it's called GTR, because I just don't consider it much of a guitar album. I would have liked to have heard what they would have done if they had gotten together in the 70s. I think that if they had gotten together in the 70s, they probably would have made a little bit more adventurous kind of prog album. Instead, it's the mid 80s and they're doing basically pop music. And I don't think either of them are really good at writing pop songs. I think they're good songwriters, but I just don't think that they're good at writing pop songs. The one good thing I can say, at least Steve Howe and Steve Hackett don't sing on it. Neither of them have very good voices. I like Max Bacon.
I love their voices. I love their voices.
Steve
more than Max's
Howe
voice.
is
I love
horrible.
his voice. Yeah.
Steve Howe is horrible, Martin.
Yeah,
Come
yeah.
on.
He's a little inaccurate, but I love his voice.
Yeah.
See, that's another
Okay.
show.
Yeah.
Love the singing.
There you go,
don't
everybody.
like the voice, or love the voice, don't like the singing, right?
Stay tuned for another show.
Yeah, but anyhow, Yeah, I mean, I like Max Bacon. He makes he's so high. I think he makes John Anderson sound like a bass. But yeah, the rest, other than the When the Heart Rules the Mind, I just don't really think too much of the rest of the album. I think for what it could have been a lot better. I do have the 2-disc set that comes with that live concert, and I think the live concert's great. So I would have loved to have seen these guys live, but yeah, but the album they did together, I just think it could have been a lot better. I would have preferred it to be more adventurous, long songs on it, less pop and more prog. So that's why it gets number 3 for me.
Nice.
Okay. Well, nearly everything that you just said, I apply to Asia, which is my number 3 pick. So you can't talk about Asia without talking about the Trevor Rabin version of Yes. 90125 was an MTV staple with Owner of a Lonely Heart. So here comes this prog supergroup that they're like, okay, prog is not going to sell. We need a pop album. So they get the guy who just produced one of the biggest pop albums of all time, Journey's Escape. Escape is diamond. It's 10 times platinum. It was phenomenally successful. So they bring this guy in. They bring in all these players. You've got John Wetton. He can write. He can sing. You've got Steve Howe. You've got Jeff Downs. You've got Carl Palmer. Funny, I was talking to Contrarian Peter Jones about this album, and he was like, Carl Palmer dumbed down his playing on this album so much. And I was like, well, I couldn't tell. But you know what? People loved it. They loved Heat of the Moment. To a lesser degree, they loved Only Time Will Tell. I think I wrote down what it hit here. It's much lower. It reached number 17, which is still a big hit, right? So it's got 2 big hits. The album eventually goes 4 times platinum. It sounds just like Journey. If Journey had done Heat of the Moment or Only Time Will Tell, it would have been right in there. The rest of the album is what I think of as stealth prog. So if you read interviews with the guys, they're like, haha, we showed them that some old 70s guys from, could still do a prog album in the 80s. And I'm like, that is a load of crap. No one bought Asia because it was a prog album. They bought it because it had a number 1 single on it, Heat of the Moment. And it's only got 2 songs, which are in that style. And all of the rest of them are Yes Light. And they're not that good as prog songs. But I love those 2 singles. I love them. And in the 80s, when they were on MTV constantly, I loved them then because MTV was my exposure to popular music. So now that we're, more than, almost 41 years past the release of this album, I look on it a little more favorably than I did. I enjoy listening to the whole thing, but it will never be in my upper canon of prog albums. And I still think that the 2 solos or the 2 singles are the best songs on it. Also, Rich, what you were saying about the ratio of keyboards to guitar. Listen to how much keyboard is on Asia. It is so keyboard centric versus the guitar compositions, at least on the singles, because that's what was big at the time. And clearly that's what was necessary in order to sell this band, because by the time you get to their second album, it eventually squeaks out platinum, but that's, it sells 1/4 of what the first album sold, and they never again hit the charts. So for me, Asia, it's a 2-song band. The rest of it is fine, but I never listened to it.
I was going to say real quick, Reed, is GTR was a response to Asia because it got so keyboard heavy that they wanted to go back and play much more of a guitar oriented album, even though they were using guitar synths and stuff. But it was kind of a reaction to what was going on in Asia as it progressed.
Yeah, it may have started out as that. We'll get more into GTR as we go along too.
Right.
All right, Martin, let's go to your number 2, sir.
Okay, so my number 2 is Asia, and there's my fully signed Asia first album that I got framed up and a little pass in there. One of the later ones. This is Rodney Matthews artwork on this, although Hugh Syme did the design of it. But yeah, through the years, I mean, they ended up with a very legitimate lineup at the end, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of cool, and lots of records, long catalog. I was never that big a fan of this album, but playing it again, I was actually a little pleasantly surprised. I was going to have them the other way around. I feel I love when you called this stealth prog. But our meaning's a little bit different. I know exactly what you meant as you explained it, but I feel like there is a fair bit of prog on here. There's more than there is on GTR. But I love Peter Jones' comment about the drumming, because I really do not like the drumming. To me, sounds like Cozy Powell on here. It's just thundering, 4 on the floor, big caveman fills. It's way too loud. The production's noisy. Mike Stone does terrible production, I think, on this, and even in Journey, I think he does as well. So it's really loud and boomy and distorted for the kind of music it is. I think there were more or less 3 pretty big songs on it, right? Soul Survivor did pretty good as well. But yeah, Heat of the Moment, of course, was the big one on it. And, in my head, all I can think of is John Wetton. God love him. I love the guy. I interviewed him lots of times. I met him a couple times, maybe 3 times. Super nice guy, but his voice always reminded me of the kind of voice that pushes a lot of air, and you're a little worried that he's going to hit the note. He has to use a lot of power. It's a little bit like Graham Bonnet, right? In that you really feel a strain, right? So anytime I think of Only Time Will Tell, all I can think of is "You're leaving now." It's like I always think of it that way, right? I think that's the right song. But yeah, so Asia, it's I was never that big a fan, but as I'm playing some of these later songs, like it kind of rocks in places, and it's got some good prog on it and stuff. I couldn't tell you what I remember about the guitar work. I mean, it's basically Steve in a pretty heavy zone, heavy or pop. But yeah, not I don't know. Even in Yes, when he's a heavy guy, I'm just not that crazy about what happens. But there you go. So I'm going to put Asia second, and I would give that album. Let's see. I gave GTR 5. Rich, what are you giving GTR as a rating out of 10?
You're muted, Rich.
So I don't know. I haven't really decided. I wasn't really thinking in terms of ranking the album. Maybe a 5 or a 6. I mean, just because that one song I think is so good. I love that song too. So I'm not going to go any higher than a 5 for the Asia album either.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
All right, I'm done.
You're up.
Excellent, Martin. I love that. All right, the whole Asia thing. When this came out in 81, 82?
82.
There was nobody else doing anything like this at that time. So when it came out, it was like a breath of fresh air for me, because I was a big Yes fan. 90125 or whatever it is had not come out until 83. So this beat it. And I was a big Steve Howe fan. So this came out in 82. I thought it was like a breath of fresh air. The beautiful thing about Asia is that it was able to open up prog to the mainstream. Now, whether you like that or not, whatever. But at this time, to have Steve Howe back in the saddle doing what Steve Howe does, and John Wetton, because I was a big UK fan. So I'm looking at both of these going, oh, right, here we go. And I just thought it was like a breath of fresh air. And of course, you've got, Jeff Downes, you've got Carl Palmer. I thought it was great. I think the first album is a classic. The second album, not so much. It's that sophomore slump thing. And the third album, Steve Howe's out of the picture, not as great. But there are later Asia albums that knock this out of the park, because Phoenix, when John Wetton came out, like in 2008, the original lineup was back out. And those records, those 3 or 4 records that the original lineup did, I think are every bit as good as that debut. There is something about the combination of those 4 guys that really bring it together. What would if I'm going to rank the first album, I would probably give it a 4 out of, well, no, wait a minute. What are we doing? If this out of 10?
10, yeah.
Oh, I give it an 8 because it was refreshing. Oh my God. They have released prog onto the masses. Yeah, you could argue that it's prog light, but still. You've got John Wetton, great voice. The songwriting's there. These guys were hungry at this point. They're trying to prove something. Yes is pretty much dissolved. There's no UK anymore. Emerson, Lake and Palmer's gone. These guys are ready to go. So you might look at it and you kind of could frown on it a bit, but I think for 1982, this was good. So I'm going to give it a, what did I say? 8?
Yep.
All right, 8. We're going to go with an 8.
Okay.
Why not? I'm just considering where it was at the time. Rich, there are 2 of you.
Yeah, my power went out.
Oh. Okay. So I think he's
And
on
I think
phone
we've
now,
lost
eh?
him again.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
So,
So
whose
anyway,
turn was it? Where
you go.
were we?
It would have been Rich's, but I think I'll go.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Okay, so internet, get your hate ready. My number 2 is UK.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you want to go next? It's your turn.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Okay,
Yeah.
go
Like I
ahead.
said, we have a really bad storm now, and my power
Okay.
went out for a few.
Oh, we're gonna lose you again.
All right, Reed, go.
Yeah,
Okay.
Reed, you better go. Yeah, Rich, we're kind of you're cutting in and out. So
Hold on,
let's see if
Rich.
you come
We'll
back.
get to you.
Go ahead, Reed.
All right, so Rich, what I had just dropped the bomb is my number 2 is UK.
Yep.
All right, so I know everyone's going to be hanging their heads and going, what are you talking about? Let me just put it out there. I am not a huge prog rock fan. And it's all about that. It hinges on what type of music do you like. UK is pure, unadulterated prog rock. The compositions of those songs are very much secondary to showing off the instrumental prowess of the members of the band. And the members of the band are titans on their instruments. But Rich, can you kill one of those vocal sources? We're getting a lot of echo.
Yeah. Okay. Is this better?
No.
No. Shit.
Or just
Oh,
mute
boy.
for now if you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you hear that storm?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Let's see if this is bad. Okay. All right. So, as I was saying, UK is pure prog with some of Alan Holdsworth's best guitar playing. But Holdsworth was never a songwriter. In fact, Holdsworth doesn't even play rhythm. He is a soloist. I once saw Alan Holdsworth in concert. It is, to this day, the only concert that I ever left halfway through. He was so boring because all he does is, the man's technical ability is astounding. I'm a guitar player. I'm watching him going, holy crap, the things this guy can do with his instrument are amazing. Now, can I get a song? Can I get some melody? Can I get something to attach my ear to? No. He would just comp chords. Do, do, do. Oh, solo time. And he would go, and he'd go for 5 minutes. And after half an hour of that, I was done. And that's how I feel listening to this album. The songs are not great. Wetton doesn't sing particularly well. The lyrics aren't particularly interesting to me. It's all about the instrumentation. But I can only listen to that for so long. Now, I rank it higher than Asia because it is so good at what it does. But what it does is not particularly entertaining to me. Weirdly, with the exception of the final 2 tracks, which are co-written by Holdsworth. He has a writing credit on those last 2 tracks, and I just said I didn't think he was a great songwriter. But the songs are slower of tempo. One of them even contains an acoustic passage. It's a remarkable acoustic passage. And it has some fantastic playing, but the fact that they bring the tempo down a little bit for those last 2 songs helps it stick in the ear more, and it's a little more entertaining to me than the rest of the album, which I put at the absolute top of the wankery prog rock genre. So, number 2 for me is UK.
All right. Rich, we'll try you
Okay.
for number 2. Can you unmute?
Yeah, let me see. I'll have to, let me see. I'll have to leave on my phone. This is such, okay. All right, so can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, and you're
Much
not
better.
echoing. Go for it.
Okay, yeah. Well, my number 2 would be Asia. I really like the first 2 albums, and well, I think the first album is the best. I really like every song off it. I love Steve Howe's playing on it. I think he adds a lot of personality to it. I remember when it first came out, I was thinking, oh, these guys are selling out. But I actually think it's a really good album. I think it's a good combination of progressive rock and pop music. It was just, taking the more commercial elements of their group and just, combining them. So I really think it's a good album. I also really like Alpha quite a bit. And it's funny, I got into that this past year. My Google speaker played the song Midnight Sun, and I didn't know who it was. I was like, who is this? And they said it was Asia, Midnight Sun. And so I was like, oh, okay. So I listened to Alpha. I had it on vinyl, and I realized that it's actually a pretty decent record. The production is terrible. It's like, it has this kind of haze all over it, and you can't really hear the guitar very well. But I think it has a lot of good vocal melodies by John Wetton on it. So I think Alpha's kind of an overlooked album. I think it could really use a remix. I think it probably would have been, I think it would have been more well received if it had a better mix, because Steve Howe does some good playing, but it's kind of like it's underwater. It's kind of under this haze. And then for Astra, that's my favorite album cover of all time. I've got it on vinyl, and I also have it on a t-shirt. And I have it as a poster in my bedroom. It's probably that and Relayer are my 2 favorite Roger Dean covers, even though it's funny, I don't like Relayer very much either. That's one Yes album I could never get into. And Astra has the song Go, and the rest of it I just don't think is very good. I'm only familiar with one of the John Payne albums, and that's Aqua. And the rest of them are really hard to find. I've never seen them in any store. You'd have to order them through, online. And I've got all the reunion albums, and none of those to me are really that memorable. But I think the first 2 albums are really good. And like I said, I think Alpha is kind of an overlooked album. I think it's one of those albums that people should probably give another chance to and give it a listen, because I think there's some really good stuff out there. And I think John Wetton sounds great on it. So anyhow, that's number 2 for me.
Nice.
Okay. And that brings us back around to Martin. I think we know what everybody's number 1 pick is at this point, but let's hear it anyway. Martin?
So yeah, just I wanted to make one more quick point about Asia. To me, I heard a lot of moody blues type vocals on that album, and I want to make one more point about GTR. I love Steve Hackett to death, but again, I love his solo stuff when he's writing melodic rock songs or the mellow stuff with the Spanish guitar in that. But this thing, one of the things in his toolbox that he's famous for is the feedback and the tapping and the loud stuff and the loud noisy stuff. And I really don't like that. And that's, I feel like we get the noisy Steve Hackett on GTR. So anyways, my first choice is UK. So there's my debut. Here's my fully signed Danger Money. And a fully signed Night After Night Live. So March 78 for the debut, March 79 for Danger Money, and then November 79 for the live album. That's all they did. They went on an amazing tour with Terry Bozzio drumming that I saw. I think it was 2012. To me, this band is, to me, it's like the first big prog super group, and Reed is right. They are absolutely an unapologetic prog band. I think that the stuff is really catchy though, like In the Dead of Night. Nothing to Lose is super catchy, but it's not because it's prog. But In the Dead of Night is catchy and prog. Danger Money is catchy and prog. There's so much great drumming across these as well. You got Bill Bruford on the first one, Terry Bozzio on the second one. John Wetton's kind of just being John Wetton. It's heavy. It's very rhythmic. It reminds me, UK reminds me almost of the Dead Boys in that you know, if you were to write up do the schematics in a boardroom of what a prog band should be or what a punk band should be. A punk band, you end up with the Dead Boys, and prog band, you end up with UK. It's like all these guys coming together, but they essentially did kind of what you expect. It's funny, you think of these three bands. Asia, I think that first album has too much of a good reputation for what it is. But generally people make fun of Asia. GTR, nobody really likes that band or that album. I think it's kind of a consensus thing out there in the world. And UK, everybody loves UK, but it's a small amount of people that know about them or care. Right. But yeah, to me, it's like a perfect prog supergroup album. Well, certainly the first one. I like the second one literally almost as much. But yeah, the second one, no Alan Holdsworth. It's just this weird lineup, right? Eddie Jobson and John and Terry Bozzio. It's a little fusiony. It's a little jazzy fusiony. A lot of notes, a lot of weird scales across it. But yeah, just love this band, and Nothing to Lose is like the best pop song of all three of these bands. So they're showing up at Asia and GTR with Nothing to Lose. Gorgeous, super poppy song. There you go. That's my number one. And I would rate that first UK album. I'd give it a 9 out of 10. Oh, okay. Grant, you're muted. Grant, you're muted.
You're still muted. Unmute your Zoom.
Unmute, Grant.
I don't know why I'm muted.
There you go.
Because my mic's not muted. All right. Well, click your buttons wisely, kids. I am totally with Martin on this 100%. The thing is, I don't think they missed a beat. You've got the first album, you've got Alan Holdsworth doing his noodling. Okay. There are a lot of people that love Alan Holdsworth. I saw Alan Holdsworth too, Reed, when he was playing the synclavier or
synth guitar.
Remember that?
Yeah.
And we were like in a small club and we saw him play, but we were still mesmerized. But I love Alan Holdsworth. Eddie Van Halen loved Alan Holdsworth. I'll leave it right there. But you've got the first album, which is, I think, more proggy than the second album. Danger Money has more of a pop element, and it's much more streamlined. A lot of the prog purists really like the first album, and they they look at the second album and go, but I love the second album because I think it's much more, it's John Wetton doing what he does best. The man knows how to write a song. He knows how to sing his track. And I think, and Terry Bozzio, for God's sakes, people, you might have missed Bill Bruford, but I swear to God, Terry Bozzio is just as good as Bill Bruford, and the same tonality. They both are playing those Remo rototoms.
Yeah.
Sounds great. I love, and no one really talks about this, but the sound of the Remo rototom.
Yeah.
Dang, I like it.
Yeah.
I love the way those sound, and those are like gone by the wayside. But I think both of those records and the live album, I think it's great. That's why I kind of look at Asia as UK light. It's like it's progressed to yet another point where it's lighter than what came before. I love all the UK stuff. When I was a kid, I was so addicted. I remember seeing them playing it like on Night Flight. If anybody remembers the show Night Flight back in the day, they used to play UK videos. And being like a young kid, I'd look at it and I just go, "Oh my God."
Yeah, and back then it was just so rare to see like bands that you like performing on TV and performing, before YouTube. So yeah, seeing a video of a band back then was just so much more special.
It was. Yeah. Nowadays you don't have that anymore. But I just remember that UK video, Rich. where there's all these Remo rototoms just going around, and they're just Terry Bozzio is just going. You're like, oh my god. When you're a kid, everything makes a big impression. But I would give
the two
the
most
whole-
entertaining drum solos I've ever seen were Terry Bozzio when UK came through Toronto here in 2012 or whatever, and,
Oh my
Eric
God.
Slick from Adrian Belews band. That young the young kid, Eric and Julie, his sister was on bass.
Mhm.
But yeah, those two good solos, and Terry had the massive kit. Yeah, it was just really.
But
cool.
Martin being a drummer, I'm sure when you saw Terry do his thing, you were probably just sitting there just going, oh my God, he's a master. And so is Bill Bruford. So, all right, the UK albums, I'm just going to give them under one big umbrella. I can't give them a 10, but I'll give them a 9. Any of them. If you can get any of the UK albums, totally go out and look for them. And if you're into prog, UK is a must. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Absolutely.
Brilliant stuff. Brilliant stuff.
Yeah.
There you go, kids.
All right, Rich, go ahead and let's stay on UK for a bit. You go ahead and follow up with your number one.
Okay, yeah, well, obviously they are my number one. They didn't have a lot of albums, but I think the quality of the albums that they did have makes me like them more than the other two. I actually like Danger Money better than the first album. I mean, the first album has In the Dead of Night, and I think that's a great song. I don't know if there's anything off Danger Money that I like more than that song, but I never really quite got into side 2 of the first album. They're a little, I don't know. I don't think the songs are as catchy and as immediate. I can't even remember like how anything on the second half of the album sounds, but I think In the Dead of Night is fantastic. And then Danger Money, I think, is even better. I think it's a more accessible album. It's a heavier album. I think on my first show that I did, we were talking about Emerson, Lake and Powell, and I was talking that I thought Danger Money was the best ELP album of the late 70s. I mean, I think it's what ELP should have been doing instead of lounging around on that Love Beach trying to sell gym shorts and Love Beach jackets and stuff. I feel like it's what ELP should have continued to do. I think the whole album is great, and my favorite song is probably The Only Thing She Needs. I love the format of that song. I think it's really exciting. I love Terry Bozzio's drumming. He almost makes you forget about Bill Bruford. He's just so good on that album. And John Wetton, he was coming up with better vocal melodies. He was you could kind of see Asia wasn't so much of a surprise after listening to Danger Money. So yeah, I think that album is really good. I would probably give the first album, this may seem like a low rating for UK fans, but maybe a 7 out of 10, but I would probably give Danger Money like a 9. And also I have a live album that they did while on tour for the first album. And on that, not only do they have songs from the first album, but they have earlier versions of a few songs that later appeared on Danger Money. And it's interesting to hear those songs with Alan Holdsworth and Bill Bruford instead of just Terry Bozzio. And they sound a little bit more jazzy. They're not quite as heavy as the versions, but it's interesting to hear that lineup do songs from Danger Money. So yeah, so I think, yeah. And Night After Night, I have that, but I don't really listen to it that much. It's never really struck me as that great of a live album. I do remember I was really excited when Eddie Jobson joined Jethro Tull. I was like, oh, cool, because at the time I was huge in the UK. So yeah, so that's why UK is number one for me. I just think the quality of the albums that they had are much better than Asia and GTR. Definitely more progressive. So yeah, that's my number one choice.
Wicked, nice job, Rich. Very cool. All right, let's
Okay.
hear Reed's incorrect choice now.
So
Yeah, I'd love to
guys
hear
know-
it. Go ahead, Reed.
GTR is my number one. Now, I'm not even going to try and say that it is objectively a better album because I don't care about that. I enjoy listening to GTR and I don't enjoy listening to UK. And here is the reason. because it's about songs. Now, let me set the Wayback Machine to 1986. I remember when the single, When the Heart Rules the Mind, came out, and the radio made such a huge deal of it. Now, at the time, I was a hardcore metalhead. And when they announced that there was a band called GTR, like guitar, well, that takes a lot of balls. Is there a shredder in it? No, it's got the guy from Yes and the guy from Genesis. And to me, Yes was the band that did Owner of a Lonely Heart, and Genesis was the band that did Abacab. And I was really having a hard time picturing what kind of song that was going to produce, right? Well, I didn't expect it to be Steelheart doing Survivor's greatest hits. So I heard the album and I thought, this is cheesy pop. I want nothing to do with it. So I had not listened to GTR since 1986 until preparing for this episode.
Wow.
So I got it out and I listened to it, and listening to these three albums, the first Asia album, the first UK album, and GTR in a row over and over again puts in stark relief exactly what's going on with each album. And I realized GTR is the only one I enjoy. I listened to it a second time immediately after listening to it once, because it's not fatiguing on the ear. It's not just, Steve Howe and Hackett blowing solos at 1,000,000 miles an hour. It's not these long compositions. It's pop songs. I actually quite like Bacon's voice. I mean, he's high pitched, but I think he suits the material great. Some of his lyrics are not awesome. Where GTR really falls down is that neither Hackett nor Steve Howe are riff writers. And to me, the reason that out of any of the songs on these three albums, my favorite song is actually Only Time Will Tell. And it's because it has that one little motif where it's do-do-do-do, that it's repeated over and over again in both the vocals and the guitar. But on all of these albums, Steve has one guitar riff, and that's Heat of the Moment. And it's a simple Pete Townsend power chord riff that everybody can relate to. Da-na-na-na, da-na. That took that song to #1. There are no riffs on GTR. It's all parts and solos, but I think that the songs, I love When the Heart Rules the Mind. Not quite as much as Only Time Will Tell, but I think it's a great song. But the songs that aren't the singles, I enjoy more than I enjoy listening to the other albums. Now, again, I already said I'm not a prog rock fan. If you're a prog rock person, there's no way you're going to pick any album other than UK. It's the only purely prog album out of these three. But as a guy who now listens to non-prog rock and pop, wearing the Noel Gallagher's High Flying Bird shirt here, GTR is my band, and it's the one that I'm going to listen to again when this show is over, and I will probably never listen to UK and Asia again, or put them way down in my rotation.
Wow.
I realize what I enjoy now most about these shows is just watching Grant's expressions. That's why I'm laughing through this whole thing. I'm not laughing at you, Reed. I'm laughing at
I'm
Grant.
like having a hemorrhage.
Before the show, I went on to Discogs and I was looking.
I have a migraine.
I was looking for some of the John Payne albums that I don't have, which is most of them. So I was thinking of actually giving those a listen, but I don't think they're not available on iTunes. I don't think they're available on Spotify. They weren't very popular. I'm kind of curious of what they sound like. And I'm thinking of, I thought I had Astra on CD and I was surprised that I didn't, and maybe hiding someplace. I have a tendency to do that sometimes. I'll buy something and then later on it's like, oh crap, I already have this, so.
You buy it and it goes hides in another corner.
Yeah,
somewhere in the
sometimes
house.
I have such a huge record and CD collection, I forget what I have. So when I find that out, I usually donate one of the copies either to the library that I work at or the radio station that I DJ at. So, yeah.
Well, forget about Max Bacon. Can we all agree that we like bacon?
I love Bacon.
There we
I
go.
even wrote a song about
I
Bacon.
love Kevin Bacon's work. I'll go to that point.
I can't eat bacon because of my migraine issues. But
Oh,
all right,
wow.
so
Never heard that
everybody,
one. So
Put in the comments how you would rank these albums. I have no illusions that UK is going to take that. But bear in mind that commercially, it's Asia, like not even close. It's like Asia, GTR, and UK is below GTR in terms of commercial appeal. No, this is just album sales, man. UK didn't sell anything compared to GTR, and GTR didn't sell anything compared to that first Asia album.
we'll revisit this in
Well-
300 years when we're like four brains in a jar debating this. So we'll see which one is remembered. I think it'll be UK.
I think it'll be UK too.
It'll be Asia. I'm sorry. There's 4 million housewives
knows
listening.
Asia
Only
anymore.
time will tell right now. All right, so we're just gonna leave it there. Leave us your comments. Check out the Patreon situation for the Contrarians. We'd love to have you join the panels and the general chats. We can always use more wise music swamis. And like, subscribe, check out the t-shirt situation. I don't remember who our t-shirt provider is anymore.
Public.
T-Public.
Mhm.
Anyway, I'm sure links will be in the description. This video has been it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun. We'll just leave it at that. And we hope to see you soon.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll
Yeah.
talk to you later.
Hey, everybody.
Thanks again. See ya.
So Grant, I'm going to need the link to next Monday's